Will the House in this divided campaign season fall to the GOP? If so, what will Republicans do in power? This week, Republican leaders in the House unveiled their Pledge to America, a campaign manifesto that is the 2010 version of the GOP's contract with America from 1994. The highlights: extend the Bush tax cuts, cut spending, and repeal health care reform.
Our pledge to America is that the Republicans stand ready to get it done, and beginning today.
But the question is, are these new ideas or more of the same? Here to debate that question, among others, one of the architects of the Republican pledge, the chairman of the House Republican Conference, Representative Mike Pence of Indiana. He's here in New York. And the man responsible for electing Democrats to the House this fall, the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Representative Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. Welcome, both of you, to Meet the Press. We're here in New York. Congressman Pence, good to have you here with me on our breezy set here this morning. We'll be able to get through that. I want to get to the pledge and its contents and this whole debate about whether these are new ideas or not in just a moment. But Congressman Van Hollen and Congressman Pence, I want to start on the narrow issue of tax cuts and the big tax cut debate that is part of this midterm campaign. We know, Congressman Van Hollen, that the Senate has kicked off the decision, kicked it back, I should say, to after the elections to take on whether or not the Bush tax cut should be extended. What will the House do on this important question?
Well, David, the House will vote before these tax cuts expire at the end of the year. Whether we vote before the election or not is something we'll take a look at. But I want to be very clear as to what the stakes are here, because what the Republicans have said is that they're going to hold tax relief for 98% of the American people hostage until they can get permanent tax breaks for the top 2%. Even though that would blow a $700 billion hole in the deficit, something that would be added to the credit cards of our children and grandchildren, and slow down economic growth and jobs going forward.
But what about the timing? Because you say it's probably not till after the election. I've talked to economists, read their words this week, who say the longer you wait, the more uncertainty. Why not put it to a vote before the midterms?
Well, we are absolutely going to get this done before the end of the year. We may well take it up before the midterms, but as you've heard from Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, they are insisting on holding the tax cuts for most of the American people hostage until they get these breaks for the very top. And we don't think that we should be adding $700 billion to our deficit. That's fiscally reckless. At a time that we need to be imposing some fiscal discipline, we should not be adding red ink that's going to have to be picked up by others and put us more in hock to China and other countries. That just does not make sense.
You can take on the substance of that, but first answer this question about the timing, because this is where the news is. Should the House take this up before the midterm vote?
David, there is no question that there should be no higher priority for the Congress of the United States today than making sure that no American sees a tax increase in January of 2011, not one. I have to tell you, this, for all the world, it seems like a moment where Congress is putting politics ahead of prosperity. What they're proposing here, even if they found some way to just extend middle-class tax relief, would be an enormous tax increase in January on job creators in this country. Higher taxes won't get people hired. Raising taxes on job creators won't create jobs, and the American people know that. But let me say one last thing. I think it would be unconscionable for this Congress to adjourn without giving the bipartisan majority in the Congress that wants to extend all current tax relief an up or down vote.
All right, but let me ask you this, because this is a key question. Yeah, hold on, Congressman. I'll get right back to you, but I want to ask this key question. In this pledge to America that we'll talk about in greater detail in just a moment, is this commitment to bringing down the deficit as well as extending the tax cuts. How do you answer the charge from Democrats, from the president as well, that you don't have a way to pay for extending the tax cuts and yet you're committed to deficit reduction?
Well, look, in the Pledge to America, which I look forward to chatting about, we say, look, we've got to do something to get this economy moving again. We give real and meaningful proposals to begin the process of reining in runaway federal spending by both political parties
how do you pay for the tax
and
cuts
reforming the government. Look, job one needs to be to create jobs. The American people know the last thing you want to do in the worst economy in 25 years is raise taxes on small business owners and family farmers. We have to vote before Congress adjourns for the political season, for the fall elections, on an up or down, but more than 30 Democrats support extending all the current tax relief. And we're calling on Speaker Pelosi and leaders like Chris, give us an up or down vote, let the Congress work its will, and give the American people certainty that there will be no tax increase.
David, this notion that Mike's talking about, that you need to have these tax breaks for the very top to create jobs and economic expansion, Mike, those tax rates are in effect right now. They're in effect right now. I don't see all this job creation as a result of those tax cuts. They've been in effect for 9 years. At the end of those 9 years, we've seen losses of millions of jobs. So this story that somehow those breaks for the folks at the top create these jobs is just nonsense. And I want to make one other point, because one other point. They've tried to mask this as an issue with small businesses. Well, it turns out that only 2% of small businesses are affected, and when you look at the definition of small businesses, you find that they're big hedge funds, big Washington lobbying firms, KKR, Price Waterhouse, because under the definition of the tax code, anything that's an S corporation qualifies. So I want Mike to tell us whether he really believes that KKR, whether Price Waterhouse, whether those are the kind of small businesses that need help, because that's the folks that they're trying to help out.
I want to ask a different question about taxes. Wait a minute.
I want to respond to that, though. I think he makes a very good point.
Okay, go ahead.
If the current tax relief was enough to get this economy moving again, the economy would be moving, and it's not. What Chris and the Democrats in Congress and the administration continue to insist on is a tax increase in January of 2011. But I want to stipulate to the point. That's why Republicans in the Pledge to America called for a 20% business deduction on all business income immediately to be voted on in this Congress. We think there needs to be more pro-growth tax relief to get the economy moving again. But for heaven's sakes, let's not raise taxes on job creators.
All right, but let me ask you a bigger question about tax cuts or tax hikes. You say in the Pledge to America that you want to bring spending down to 2008 levels, right, which you well know is not enough to really seriously tackle the deficit, even if you bring it back to 2008. So the question for you, and I'll ask Congressman Van Hollen, how can you rule out tax hikes as we move forward if you want to get serious about tackling the deficit?
Well, look, number one, I think you rule out tax increases because our problem isn't that the American people are taxed too little. Our problem is that Washington spends too much. In the Pledge to America, we call for cutting discretionary spending to pre-stimulus, pre-bailout levels, cutting the amount of funding allocated to Congress, freezing all pay on non-security federal employees, ending federal control of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, ending TARP. That'd save $1 trillion over 10 years alone. And, reducing discretionary spending back to those 2008 levels, that would be, that would save $100 billion this year.
That's fine, but that really doesn't tackle the
reform.
deficit completely. Congressman Van Hollen, the question for you and for Democrats, can you rule out tax hikes as we move forward to be serious about cutting the deficit?